Victoria Chen pressed the elevator button for the 42nd floor while balancing a steaming cup of coffee in one hand and clutching her leather portfolio in the other. Her reflection, in the polished steel doors, revealed what she already knew. She looked like someone who had been up until 3 in the morning, perfecting a presentation while her 8-year-old son Tommy slept fitfully with another fever. Dark circles shadowed her brown eyes, and her usually neat black hair had escaped from its professional bun in several rebellious strands. "Come on, come on," she whispered to the elevator as other people filed in around her. Wellington Tech Industries was known for punctuality, and being late to the most important job interview of her career would be catastrophic. The position as Senior Renewable Energy Engineer represented everything she had worked toward since graduating MIT 7 years ago. More importantly, it offered the financial security that would let her stop working 3 part-time consulting jobs and actually spend time with Tommy. The elevator climbed smoothly past floor after floor, each ding marking another second closer to her appointment with destiny. Victoria reviewed her talking points one more time, silently rehearsing how she would present her innovative solar panel efficiency designs. She had spent months developing technology that could increase energy output by 30% while reducing manufacturing costs. This was her moment to prove that a single mother from a working-class background could compete with anyone in the tech world. At the 38th floor, the elevator stopped with its usual gentle bounce. Victoria watched the numbers light up and felt her stomach drop as the doors opened to reveal a tall figure stepping inside. The man was impeccably dressed in a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent, with dark hair that looked like it had been professionally styled that morning. He moved with the confident ease of someone accustomed to having doors opened for him, both literally and metaphorically. Victoria tried to make herself smaller in the corner of the elevator, suddenly aware of her discount department store blazer and the small stain on her blouse that Tommy's breakfast had left behind. The man glanced at his expensive watch and then at the floor buttons, his brow furrowing slightly as if calculating something important. She caught a glimpse of his profile, strong jawline, intelligent eyes that seemed to take in everything around him with quiet intensity. "Floor 42. He asked, his voice carrying a slight hint of an accent she couldn't place. British, maybe, or perhaps he had just spent time in international business circles. "Yes, that's right," Victoria managed, trying to keep her voice steady and professional. She noticed he had already pressed the same button, which meant he was heading to the same destination. Wellington Tech Industries occupied the entire top 4 floors of the building, so that narrowed down the possibilities considerably. The elevator continued its ascent, and Victoria found herself stealing glances at her fellow passenger. There was something familiar about him, though she couldn't place where she might have seen him before. Maybe in one of the business magazines she occasionally read while waiting in Tommy's pediatrician's office, or perhaps in the financial section of the newspaper she browsed during her lunch breaks. Her phone buzzed softly in her purse, and she carefully extracted it with her free hand to check the message. Tommy's teacher had texted to confirm that he was feeling better and would be able to stay for after-school care as planned. Victoria smiled with relief. The last thing she needed was to have to cut this interview short because of a sick child. The elevator reached the 41st floor, and Victoria felt her anxiety spike. One more floor to go, and then she would walk into the most important meeting of her professional life. She took a deep breath and tried to center herself, focusing on all the hours of preparation that had brought her to this moment. Her designs were solid, her presentation was polished, and she had every qualification the job posting had requested. That's when disaster struck. The elevator gave another of its gentle bounces as it approached the 42nd floor. This time the motion was slightly more pronounced than usual. Victoria, lost in her thoughts and gripping her phone, didn't compensate quickly enough. The coffee cup tilted in her other hand, and she watched in horror as the hot liquid arced through the air in perfect slow motion. The coffee splashed directly across the front of the impeccably dressed man's suit, creating a dark brown stain that spread across the expensive fabric like spilled ink on pristine paper. Victoria's portfolio fell from her arm as she instinctively reached out to help, and papers scattered across the elevator floor like oversized confetti. Her presentation materials, her resume copies, her carefully organized research notes, everything lay in a jumbled mess at their feet. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," Victoria gasped. frantically grabbing for napkins in her purse while trying to assess the damage she had caused. The coffee was still steaming, which meant it was hot enough to have burned him through the fabric. "Are you hurt? I can't believe I just did that. This is absolutely mortifying." The man looked down at his ruined suit and then at Victoria, who was now crouched on the floor, gathering her scattered papers with shaking hands. For a moment, his expression was unreadable. She couldn't tell if he was angry, amused, or simply processing what had just happened. The elevator doors opened with their cheerful ding, revealing the sleek marble lobby of Wellington Tech Industries beyond. "It's quite all right," the man said, his voice surprisingly calm considering the circumstances. He knelt down and began helping her collect the papers, his movements careful and precise. "Accidents happen. Though I have to admit, this is definitely a first for me." Victoria looked up at him from where she knelt on the elevator floor, and their eyes met for the first time. His were a warm brown color, like coffee with cream, and there was something unexpectedly kind in their depths. She had expected anger or irritation, but instead she saw what looked almost like curiosity, as if he found the situation more interesting than infuriating. "Let me pay for the dry cleaning," she said quickly, taking the papers he handed her. "Or replacement, if it can't be cleaned. I know that suit probably costs more than my car. This is just my luck, the most important day of my career. I assault someone with breakfast beverages." A smile tugged at the corner of the man's mouth. "Assault with breakfast beverages? That's definitely not a charge I've heard before." He stood and extended a hand to help her up, seemingly unbothered by the coffee stains spreading across his shirt. "And before you assume the worst about the suit's cost, you should know that I have a very practical tailor." Victoria accepted his help and rose to her feet. Clutching her somewhat disorganized portfolio against her chest like a shield, she was acutely aware that she probably looked like a complete disaster, frazzled, embarrassed and definitely not the polished professional she had hoped to present to potential employers. "I have an interview here in about 5 minutes," she said, glancing at her watch and feeling her heart sink. "Do you think there's a bathroom where I could at least try to make myself look presentable? Although at this point, I'm not sure anything can save this first impression." The man studied her for a moment. She noticed him glance down at the papers in her portfolio. The top sheet was her resume, with her name clearly visible in bold letters across the top. His expression shifted slightly, and she wondered if he was trying to place where he had seen her credentials before. "Victoria Chen," he read aloud, and she nodded miserably. "Renewable energy engineer, MIT graduate, extensive experience in solar panel optimization." He looked back up at her face. "You wouldn't happen to be interviewing for the senior engineer position, would you?" "Yes. And I've probably just ruined any chance I had," Victoria replied, trying to smooth down her escaped hair strands with her free hand. "Nothing says hire me quite like attacking random people in elevators. I should probably just go home and update my resume to include coordination issues under special skills." The man was quiet for a long moment, and Victoria braced herself for whatever polite dismissal was coming. She had worked so hard to get this interview, had spent weeks preparing and arranging childcare and pushing through her own exhaustion. Now it was going to end before it even began, all because she couldn't hold a coffee cup steady in an elevator. "Actually," the man said finally, "I think you might be surprised by how this turns out." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card. Holding it out to her with that same mysterious smile, "My name is James Wellington. And you're not late for your interview, you're right on time." Victoria stared at the business card, her mind struggling to process what she was reading. James Wellington, Chief Executive Officer, Wellington Tech Industries. The man she had just drenched with coffee wasn't some random businessman heading to a meeting. He was the founder and CEO of the company, the billionaire entrepreneur whose innovative approach to sustainable technology had revolutionized the industry. "You think," a quote she began, then stopped, unable to finish the sentence. This was James Wellington, the man whose company she had researched obsessively for months. The philanthropist who had donated millions to environmental causes. The visionary who had started Wellington Tech in his garage 15 years ago and built it into one of the most respected names in renewable energy. "I'm the person you're here to meet," James confirmed, seeming to enjoy her shocked expression. "And I have to say, Ms. Chen, you've certainly made this morning more interesting than usual. Shall we head to the conference room?" I'm very curious to hear about your solar panel innovations. Victoria followed him through the marble lobby, her mind reeling with disbelief and mortification. She had just covered one of the most powerful men in the tech industry with hot coffee, and somehow he was acting like it was a minor inconvenience. As they walked past floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, she tried to process the surreal turn her morning had taken. "Mr. Wellington," she said, hurrying to keep pace with his longer stride, "I really am incredibly sorry about your suit. This isn't how I imagined starting our meeting." James stopped at a set of double doors marked Conference Room A and turned to face her. "Victoria, may I call you Victoria? In my experience, the most interesting conversations rarely begin the way we expect them to. Besides," he added with a grin that transformed his entire face, "it's been far too long since anyone treated me like a regular person, instead of a walking dollar sign. Shall we see what other surprises you have in store?" The conference room at Wellington Tech Industries looked like something from a science fiction movie, with its floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city below and walls lined with screens displaying real-time data from renewable energy projects around the globe. Victoria tried to focus on her presentation materials rather than the intimidating surroundings, but she kept stealing glances at James Wellington as he settled into his chair across from her. He had changed into a fresh shirt that someone from his staff had apparently procured within minutes of their elevator encounter. Though he still wore the coffee-stained suit jacket with remarkable nonchalance, Victoria couldn't decide if this showed impressive confidence or if he simply had so many suits that ruining one didn't matter. Either way, his casual attitude about the whole incident made her feel slightly less mortified. "Before we begin," James said, pouring himself a cup of coffee from a service that had appeared as if by magic, "would you like some coffee? I promise the cups here are more stable than elevator situations typically allow." Victoria felt her cheeks warm. "I think I've done enough damage with coffee for one day." "Thank you." She arranged her papers on the polished conference table, trying to project the professionalism she had planned to display from the beginning. "Should I start with my background, or would you prefer to jump directly into the technical specifications of my designs?" Actually, James leaned back in his chair, studying her with those perceptive brown eyes. "I'd like to know what drives you. Your resume is impressive, but resumes don't tell me why. Someone with your credentials is working 3 part-time consulting jobs instead of having a permanent position somewhere." The directness of his question caught Victoria off guard. She had prepared for technical inquiries about her solar panel innovations, questions about her experience with large-scale energy projects, even challenges about her ability to manage teams. She hadn't expected him to cut straight to the personal circumstances that had shaped her career path. "I have a son," she said carefully, trying to gauge his reaction. "Tommy is 8, and he's been through some health challenges that required me to prioritize flexibility over traditional career advancement. Consulting work allows me to be available when he needs me, even if it means sacrificing financial stability." James nodded thoughtfully. "And his father?" "Isn't in the picture." Victoria's voice carried a note of finality that discouraged further questions on that topic. "It's been just Tommy and me for the past 5 years, which is why this position is so important to me. It would provide the kind of security we need while letting me work on projects that could genuinely make a difference in the world." "Tell me about Tommy," James said, surprising her again with his unexpected direction. "What's he like?" Victoria's entire demeanor shifted as she spoke about her son. The professional mask slipped away, replaced by the warm glow that always appeared when she talked about Tommy. "He's curious about everything. Last week he asked me to explain how solar panels work. So we built a small working model using a calculator's solar strip and some LED lights. He stayed up past his bedtime testing different angles to maximize the energy output." "A future engineer?" James suggested. "Maybe. Or maybe an astronaut, or a marine biologist, or a professional cookie taster. His career aspirations change weekly." Victoria laughed, and the sound filled the conference room with something warmer than all its high-tech displays. "Whatever he becomes, I want him to know that big dreams are possible even when you start from humble circumstances. James was quiet for a moment, his gaze moving to the windows and the sprawling city beyond. I started Wellington Tech when I was 23, he said finally. Dropped out of graduate school, maxed out for credit cards, spent 18 months living on ramen noodles and stubbornness. Everyone thought I was crazy to believe that renewable energy could be profitable on a large scale. What changed their minds? Victoria asked. Results? James smiled, but there was something almost melancholy in his expression. Success has a way of making people forget they ever doubted you. Though sometimes I wonder if the cost was worth it, before Victoria could ask what he meant. Her phone began ringing with the urgent tone she had assigned to Tommy's school. Her heart jumped as she glanced at the screen. Calls during school hours usually meant problems. I'm sorry, I have to take this, she said, already reaching for the phone. Hello, this is Victoria Chen. Miss Chen, this is Nurse Patricia at Westfield Elementary. Tommy's fever has spiked to 101.5, and he's asking for you. We need someone to pick him up as soon as possible. Victoria felt the familiar panic that struck whenever Tommy was sick. I'll be there in 20 minutes, she said, then looked across the table at James with an expression of defeat. I'm so sorry, Mr. Wellington. My son is sick at school, and I don't have anyone else who can get him. I know this looks unprofessional, but go, James said immediately, already standing. Your son needs you, but the interview can wait. How are you getting to the school? Victoria was gathering her papers with shaking hands, her mind already racing through logistics. Subway to the bus line, then a short walk. It'll take about 40 minutes total, maybe longer, depending on connections. That's too long for a sick child to wait. James was pulling out his phone, his fingers moving quickly across the screen. My driver will take you. David can have you there in 15 minutes, traffic permitting. I can't accept that. Victoria protested automatically, even as part of her wanted to cry with gratitude. You don't even know me, and I just ruined your morning. I can't impose on your kindness any further. You're not imposing. You're being a good mother. James walked around the table and gently took her portfolio from her hands. I'll keep this safe until you're ready to continue our conversation. Focus on Tommy right now. 20 minutes later, Victoria was sitting in the back of a luxury sedan that probably cost more than her annual salary. Holding Tommy against her chest as he dozed fitfully in the aftermath of children's fever medication. The driver, David, had been waiting outside the school when she arrived, and he'd helped her get Tommy settled in the car without asking any questions about the unusual circumstances. Where to, Ms. Chen? David asked through the privacy partition. Home? Or would you prefer to stop somewhere for soup? There's a good deli on the way that makes excellent chicken broth home. Please, Victoria said, then added quietly, thank you for waiting. And thank you for not asking questions about why your boss's driver is playing shofar too. Strangers, David chuckled softly. Mr. Wellington has his own way of doing things. Always has. Besides, anyone can see you're a devoted mother. That kind of love deserves support, not questions. Tommy stirred in her arms and looked up at her with glassy eyes. Mama, why does my head hurt so much? Just a fever, sweetheart. You'll feel better soon. Victoria stroked his hair, feeling the heat radiating from his small forehead. We're going home, so you can rest in your own bed. Are you in trouble for leaving work? The innocent question hit Victoria harder than any professional disappointment could have. Tommy had grown up watching her juggle responsibilities, apologized for having to leave events early, explained to teachers why she sometimes had to bring him to work meetings when childcare fell through. At 8 years old, he already understood that her availability for him often came at a cost to her career. No, baby. The man I was meeting understood that mommies need to take care of their children first. Was he nice? Victoria thought about James Wellington's immediate response when she'd received the call. The way he'd arranged transportation without hesitation, his quiet statement about being a good mother. Yes, he was very nice. Surprisingly nice? Maybe he has kids too? Maybe. Victoria settled Tommy more comfortably against her shoulder. Watching the familiar neighborhoods pass by through the tinted windows, she found herself wondering about James Wellington's personal life. He wore no wedding ring. and something in his expression when he talked about the costs of success suggested a man who had achieved everything he'd wanted professionally, but perhaps sacrificed other things along the way. By the time they reached her modest apartment building, Tommy's fever had broken slightly, and he was able to walk upstairs with minimal assistance. Victoria tucked him into bed with his favorite stuffed elephant and a cup of lukewarm ginger ale, then sat at her small kitchen table staring at her phone. She should call Wellington Tech and apologize again. Maybe try to reschedule the interview if James was still willing to consider her after the morning's disruptions. But every time she started to dial, she hesitated. What if his kindness had been purely professional courtesy? What if he had already moved on to other candidates who didn't come with complicated personal situations? Her phone rang before she could make the call, displaying a number she didn't recognize. "Hello? This is Victoria. Victoria, it's James Wellington. How is Tommy feeling?" The genuine concern in his voice surprised her. "Better, thank you. His fever's coming down and he's resting. I want to apologize again for having to leave so abruptly. I understand if you'd prefer to interview other candidates, actually. I'd like to continue our conversation. Would you be available tomorrow morning? Same time? Same conference room? You still want to interview me?" Victoria couldn't hide the disbelief in her voice. "After everything that happened today?" "Victoria," James said, and something in the way he said her name made her heart skip slightly. "Today showed me more about your character than any traditional interview could have. You're dedicated to excellence in your work. You're a loving and responsible parent, and you handle unexpected challenges with grace. Those are exactly the qualities we need here. But I spilled coffee on you and had to abandon our meeting. You had an accident, which you handled with appropriate concern and apology. And you prioritized your child's well-being over your career advancement, which tells me you understand what truly matters in life." James paused, and when he continued, his voice was softer. "Not everyone in my position encounters people who remember that success means nothing if it comes at the expense of love." Victoria felt tears prick at her eyes, though she couldn't quite explain why. "Thank you for understanding. Thank you for reminding me what understanding looks like. I'll see you tomorrow morning, Victoria. And please give Tommy my best wishes for a quick recovery." After she hung up, Victoria sat in her quiet kitchen, listening to the soft sounds of Tommy sleeping in the next room. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to hope that perhaps things were finally starting to look up for both of them. 3 months later, Victoria stood in the same conference room where she had first properly met James Wellington. But everything about the scene had transformed. Instead of nervous interview materials spread across the polished table, engineering blueprints and prototype components filled every available surface. The wall screens displayed real-time data from their revolutionary solar panel installations across 6 different states, showing efficiency rates that had exceeded even their most optimistic projections. The Arizona installation is performing at 130% of projected capacity, Victoria announced to the assembled team of engineers and project managers. The new photovoltaic cells are not only capturing more direct sunlight, but they're also converting reflected light from the desert sand into usable energy. We've essentially created panels that work with their environment instead of despite it. James watched her present their findings with the same attention he had given her that first morning. But now his admiration came without the professional distance he had maintained during her interview. Victoria had not only proven herself as an exceptional engineer, but she had brought something to Wellington Tech that he hadn't realized was missing, a sense of purpose that went beyond profit margins and market domination. "What about production costs?" asked Robert Kim, their chief financial officer. "The board is going to want to see numbers that justify scaling this technology." Victoria smiled confidently. "Manufacturing costs have decreased by 22% compared to our previous generation panels. The new design uses fewer rare earth elements, and the simplified construction process requires less specialized labor. We can offer these panels at competitive prices while maintaining healthy profit margins." After the meeting concluded and the conference room emptied, James remained behind, studying the detailed schematics Victoria had left on the table. She was gathering her materials when he spoke. "Do you remember what you told me about wanting Tommy to know that big dreams are possible?" he asked, of course. Victoria looked up from organizing her blueprints, noting the thoughtful expression on James's face. Over the past months, she had learned to read his moods, the slight furrow between his eyebrows when he was processing complex problems, the way his voice softened when he was thinking about something personal rather than professional. You've proven that to him better than any words could have. James moved closer to where she stood, and Victoria felt the familiar flutter in her stomach that had been growing stronger each day they worked together. These panels you've designed are going to change how the world thinks about renewable energy. Children like Tommy are going to grow up in a cleaner world because of your innovations. Children like Tommy are going to benefit from the entire Wellington Tech team's efforts, Victoria corrected gently, including a CEO who was willing to take a chance on a single mother who assaulted him with coffee. James laughed, the sound warm and genuine in the empty conference room. That coffee incident was the best thing that happened to this company. Though I have to admit, it wasn't just your engineering skills that convinced me to hire you. Victoria felt her heart skip as James stepped closer, his expression growing serious. What was it then? The way you talked about Tommy. The way you dropped everything when he needed you. The way you never once complained about having to balance your career as being a parent. James reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the gentle touch sending warmth spreading through her entire body. You showed me what it looks like to have priorities that actually matter, James, Victoria whispered, her voice catching slightly as she recognized the shift in the atmosphere between them. This wasn't a conversation between boss and employee, or even between colleagues who had become friends. This was something else entirely, something that had been building between them for months, but had remained unspoken until now. I know this. Complicates things, James said softly. The company policies, the professional boundaries, the fact that I'm your boss. But Victoria, I can't pretend anymore that what I feel for you is purely professional admiration. Victoria set down her blueprints and turned to face him fully, her brown eyes searching his face. What exactly do you feel? Instead of answering immediately, James cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs tracing gentle circles across her cheekbones. I feel like I've been sleepwalking through my life until I met you. I feel like every success I've achieved means nothing compared to hearing Tommy laugh when we build robots together in my office. I feel like the person I am when I'm with you and your son is the person I was always supposed to be. We build robots in your office, Victoria asked, smiling despite the intensity of the moment. Every Tuesday after school. Didn't Tommy mention our engineering club? We're working on a solar-powered car that can navigate obstacle courses. James grinned sheepishly. He's actually a better programmer than half my software development team, Victoria. Felt something click into place in her chest, like a puzzle piece she hadn't realized was missing. You've been spending time with Tommy without telling me? He needed help with a science project, and you were in meetings with the production team. It started as a favor, but then he asked if I wanted to see his rock collection. And somehow 2 hours disappeared. James's expression grew tender. He's an amazing kid, Victoria. Curious and kind and so proud of his mom that he spent 40 minutes explaining to me why you're the smartest person in the world. Tears pricked at Victoria's eyes as she imagined Tommy chattering away to James about solar panels and space exploration and whatever other topics had captured his 8-year-old imagination that day. He likes you too. He told me last week that his new friend James knows more about rockets than anyone except NASA. His new friend James is completely enchanted by both of you, James admitted. I've spent 15 years building this company, accumulating wealth and influence, and all the markers of success that society tells us matter. But Victoria, the happiness I feel when Tommy shows me his latest Lego creation, or when you smile at me across a conference table, or when the three of us have dinner together and it feels like family, that's worth more than everything else combined. Victoria stood on her tiptoes and kissed him then, pouring months of unspoken feelings into the contact between their lips. James responded immediately, his arms coming around her waist and pulling her closer against him. The kiss was soft and sweet and tasted like the future they were both finally ready to reach for. When they broke apart, both breathing slightly harder than the conference room's air conditioning system warranted, Victoria rested her forehead against his. So what happens now? she asked. Do we pretend this conversation never happened and go back to being professional colleagues? Do I need to find another job to avoid conflicts of interest? Do we figure it out together? James interrupted gently. All of it. The company policies, the personal relationship, the blended family dynamics, the whole beautiful, complicated mess. But we do it together, if you're willing. I'm willing, Victoria whispered. Tommy adores you and well, I think I might be falling in love with you. Only might be? James teased, pressing a soft kiss to her temple. Because I passed might be about 2 weeks after I met you. Right around the time Tommy drew that picture of the three of us at the zoo and asked if you thought I might want to come to his school's science fair, Victoria. Pulled back to look at him with surprise. He drew a picture of us together. It's hanging on my refrigerator at home, right next to his school photos and the certificate he got for reading 50 books this semester. James smiled at her expression. I may have been falling in love with your son almost as quickly as I was falling in love with you. Speaking of Tommy. Victoria glanced at her watch. I need to pick him up from after-school care in 20 minutes. Do you want to come with me? We could stop for ice cream and tell him about our new family situation. Though knowing him, he'll probably just ask if this means he gets to keep building robots with you. Ice cream sounds perfect. And Victoria? James took her hand as they gathered her materials and headed toward the door. Thank you for what? For spilling coffee on me in that elevator. For showing me what really matters. For letting me into your life and Tommy's life. For making me remember that the best kind of success is the kind you share with people you love. Victoria squeezed his hand as they walked through the sleek offices of Wellington Tech Industries, past the wall of awards and patents and all the outward symbols of James's professional achievements. Thank you for seeing past a frazzled single mother with coffee-staining tendencies to the person. That person underneath is extraordinary, James said. And I plan to spend the rest of my life making sure you never doubt that. 6 months later. The wedding was small and perfect, held in the same conference room where they had first met properly. Tommy served as ring bearer and best man rolled into one, proudly announcing to anyone who would listen that his mom was marrying his favorite rocket scientist. The cake was decorated with sugar replicas of solar panels, and instead of throwing rice, guests launched biodegradable confetti made from recycled paper. During his toast, James looked out at their gathered friends and family. Victoria's parents who had flown in from California, his business partners who had become like brothers over the years, Tommy's teachers who had watched him blossom under the attention of 2 devoted adults. 3 years ago, someone had told me that the most important business meeting of my life would begin with getting coffee spilled on my suit. I would have suggested they reconsider their understanding of professional networking, James said, earning chuckles from the assembled group. But sometimes the universe has better plans for us than anything we could design ourselves. He turned to Victoria, radiant in the simple white dress that Tommy had helped pick out, and to the boy who had officially become his stepson that morning during a courthouse ceremony that had left all 3 of them in tears of joy. Victoria, you taught me that true innovation isn't just about creating better technology, it's about building a better life. Tommy, you showed me that the best adventures happen when you're curious enough to ask questions and brave enough to believe in amazing possibilities. Together, you've given me a family I never knew I was missing and a kind of happiness I never knew existed. As James raised his glass in a toast to their new beginning, Victoria felt Tommy slip his small hand into hers. Her son looked up at her with bright eyes and whispered, Mom, do you think our family's going to invent something cool together? Victoria squeezed Tommy's hand and smiled at her new husband, surrounded by the warmth of love and possibility and the quiet certainty that their best discoveries were still ahead of them. I think we already have, sweetheart. I think we already have.